Well, first I need to talk about my family. I was raised by a very bohemian family in Mexico City. My grandmother was a poet, my sister was a journalist. There were always artists in the house. And when I was a teenager, I realized I wanted to chronicle my life through literature and live art images. Since then, I have been both a writer and a performance artist, and the two practices have been an integral part of my identity. Languaging and embodying ideas are complementary creative processes for me. Also, at the same time, I need to talk about my permanent crisis of professional identity, which also goes back to my teenage years. Since I was young, I wanted to be many things. I wanted to be a poet, a journalist, a philosopher, a visual artist, an actor, a historian, an activist. And then I suddenly discovered that performance could give me the possibility to be all these things at the same time. So in a sense, performance became the fabric that interwoven all these concerns. Then I began to cross the US-Mexico border. And when I started crossing the border, performance and literature helped me to recapture my agency and the very citizenship that both of my countries, Mexico and the US, had previously denied to me. So performance became a way for me to become a first-class citizen. Well, at the risk of sounding like I suffer from multiple personality disorder, I can say that at different times and in different cultural contexts, I have been many Mexicans, many post-Mexicans, many Chicanos and Neo-Chicanos, or simply many Latino Americans. And performance has helped me to constantly reposition myself in all the multiple contexts I inhabit and work on. I also feel that I'm an international citizen in the kind of Vonnegutian sense, and that also my gender identity is constantly fluctuating, somewhere between extreme female and male. And all these processes, all these multiple repertoires of identity, again, I have been able to language through performance. And in a sense, I'm not performing different roles, but rather each of my multiple and ever-changing identities is equally real and authentic. And my main performance personas and literary voices reflect and reveal these multiple repertoires of identities. I can't help it. Articulating these processes, making them visible to the audience, has become an important objective for my performance art. I have multiple artistic practices. One is my solo work. In it, I have explored two distinct territories: the ongoing rewriting and reenactments of some of my classic performances, and I call this project My Living Archive, and the writing and testing of brand new material dealing with radical citizenship and what I call imaginary activism. In both cases, revealing to the audience the process of creating and performing the material becomes the actual project, which is precisely what I'm going to be doing tonight. Also, as a solo performance artist, I'm interested in exploring the cultural space between North and South. The territory of misunderstanding that exists between the US and Mexico. I think that Mexicans are fully aware of the US all the time in a way that Americans aren't. Mexicans are constantly looking north through media, the internet, and global pop. But if you browse the newscasts of the US and the daily papers, you rarely find a news item connecting to Mexico or Latin America, If you're lucky to find one, it is always connected to violence, kidnappings, crime cartels, and drugs. Mexico has become, in the American imaginary, hell on our doorsteps. This misencounter of gazes, this permanent misunderstanding between the two countries, is a very fertile territory for research in my solo work. Now, the work I do with my troupe overlaps with my personal work, but it's also different because it's really about fully embodied ideas and utilizing the human body as a metaphor for the political body. So the work I do with my troupe is mainly constituted by ritual actions. Let me just give you an example, no? In 2003, as a response to the US invasion of Iraq, my troupe and I began working with political acupuncture. We first started working with nude Arab bodies as a metaphor for the wounded territory of the Middle East, utilizing 44 needles bearing flags of the countries involved in the much-touted coalition of the willing. Then in 2004, when the bloody kind of territorial drug wars took Mexico by surprise, we started using needles bearing flags either of the countries occupied by crime cartels in Latin America or by the states in Mexico controlled by crime cartels. Then we would ask audience members to form a line and to, one by one, in dialogue with the acupuncturist, extract the flag of the body, mapa, cuerpo, territorio. This series of performances was originally titled Mapa Corpo, or Body Map. More recently, we have been also obsessed with the culture of violence in Mexico. Where does it come from? Why, within a decade, Mexico became one of the most dangerous countries of the Americas? And one of the current live art images that we have been using in the last 3 years is the image of a huge pig or cow carcass from the slaughterhouse intervened by the nude body of a performance artist. In Mexico, we titled this piece as Adam and Eve in Times of War. And audiences understand the metaphor very clearly, and we have no problems presenting the performance, no? Often we ask the audience to hang milagros on the carcass of the pig with the names of those relatives and friends who have disappeared. Besides the work I do as an activist, fighting for the rights of migrant workers or trying to defend the right of immigrants to cross borders or to contest irrational immigration laws, I feel that it is my responsibility as a writer and as an artist just to keep imagination alive, to reclaim the power that imagination has to transform so-called reality, no? Imagination, for me, is my nation. That's where I wish to live and die. And why? Because when you don't have access to real power, poetry replaces science and performance art becomes politics. In my project of imaginary activism, Latinos occupy a fictional center and dominant Anglo culture is pushed to the margins and treated as foreign and unfamiliar. I also believe that artists, whether we are aware or not, have collective purposes. You know, talking back to power, chronicling the dark corners of the human condition, wrestling with the inner demons, with our personal inner demons and the demons of society, mentoring young artists. That's also extremely important for my troupe and I. I think that art is constantly testing the limits and possibilities of democracy. In the name of art, people have done inexplicable things, crucified themselves as a form of protest, created fake corporations to denounce environmental injustice, printed useless money and conceptual passports to invent our own countries. In the name of art and literature, people invent mysterious languages, religions, communities, and architectures that are more congruent with our needs and aspirations. Artists and writers have envisioned parallel universes in which our contemporaries can engage in meaningful forms of freedom and creativity. And in this sense, I feel that true democracy can only exist in the imagination of art and literature. Keeping freedom and creativity alive in a time when these words have been sequestered by high-tech corporations and pop advertisement is a very, very important collective purpose, no? Constructing imaginary nations where there is no homeland security or patriot acts, where there are no borders, is an important political project, even if these imaginary nations only exist for the duration of the performance.